Alright, y'all. Check this out. BCM Raider here, bringing you another Commander deck tech. Today, we have Darien, King of Kjeldor. I want to thank my friend for allowing me to showcase this deck. This is going to be a very, very unique, fun deck. Because we're going to be creating a lot of tokens. We're going to be gaining life, primarily. And we're going to be doing big, stupid, dumb things with all this life that we're going to gain. So, let's get right into it. First up is the land base. This is a very simple land base. We have 24 planes. A couple cycling lands, because we're going to want to draw lots of cards. So we have Secluded Steppe, Drifting Meadow. And we're going to want to get as many planes out of our deck as possible. So we have Myriad Landscape, Terramorphic Expanse, Evolving Wilds. And now we're going to want to deal with our opponent's lands that might be hurting us and preventing us from doing things. So we have Tectonic Edge, Ghost Quarter, now, we're going to want to draw more cards. So, we have War Room. I like War Room in monocolored decks because you really only have to pay 3 colorless mana and 1 life just to draw a card. And that's a very low cost. It gets really hard in more multicolored commanders, but in monocolor, it's good. Draw those cards, kids. And to continue to draw more cards, we have Arch of Orazca. Getting the City's Blessing for this is going to be a cakewalk, because we're going to be putting so many tokens on the battlefield, and we're going to have lots of permanents. So getting 10 permanents isn't that big of a deal. Now we have Mutavault. Mutavault plays a very special role in this deck. Not only is it every creature type, but we're going to use this with a very certain artifact, which I'll get to in just a moment. Let's get into the artifacts. First up is Soul Ring, Pearl Medallion. This is going to reduce the cost of our white spells. Skull Clamp, because we're creating tokens and we're going to draw cards. But also, we're going to utilize when the creatures go to the graveyard as well, which I'll touch on a little later. Now we have a very powerful, cheap artifact that's going to synergize very well with what we're doing with Darien, with Altar of the Brood. If you guys seen my other videos, I've touched on this card many times. Your opponents hate this card. You love playing this card. So go out there, kids, and mill your opponents. Okay. Now we have a couple artifacts that synergize with Darien specifically. With Ankh of Mishra, we're going to play lands and we're going to take 2 damage. But you're probably wondering, why do we want to take damage? I can answer that, Timmy. Because when we take damage, we're just going to create that many more tokens that we're either going to gain life with them or make them very large and kill our opponents. Now we have Dingus Staff. Dingus Staff is going to synergize very well with Skull Clamp. So when those creatures die, you're going to get more creatures and draw the 2 cards. Now we have Jade Monolith. Jade Monolith is going to be very beneficial because we can redirect damage to ourselves to get even more tokens. Now we have Slate of Ancestry. This is going to draw us a monumental amount of cards. For the simple fact of, for 4 mana, when you activate this, chances are we're not going to have that many cards in our hand anyway, because we're not focused on casting spells to win the game. We're basically relying on utilizing tokens and creatures to win us the game. So, if we can draw as many cards as possible, we're going to do it. Okay. Now we have Oketra's Monument. This is a very, very good artifact. Even if you're not playing white, you can still run Oketra's Monument. Because whenever you cast a creature, doesn't matter if it's white or what, you're going to get more creatures. Now we have Blasting Station. Blasting Station is going to synergize very well with all these tokens. And if we're at a very high life total, we're going to sacrifice that creature. We're going to deal 1 damage to ourselves to get more tokens. But what's the point in that? It's the simple fact of we're playing Altar of the Brood. So if we've gained a substantial amount of life or infinite life, you can mill your opponents in 1 shot with Blasting Station. Next we have Archaeomancer's Map. This is just primarily here just to get us more lands. But Archaeomancer's Map has this very nice land tax static effect on it. For those of you who aren't familiar with land tax, if your opponents control more lands than you, you can search for lands, or in this case, you can put a land on the battlefield from your hand. Okay. And because we're going to be gaining lots of life, we're going to turn that life gain into card draw with Well of Lost Dreams. Now we have Ashnod's Altar. That way we can get mana with all these tokens we're going to create. Now we have Aetherflux Reservoir. If we've gained a lot of life, we can just pay 50 life. We could deal this damage to our opponents, or if we survive, we can deal 50 damage to ourselves and get 50 more creatures. That's a fun little interaction. Now we have Throne of the God Pharaoh. You've seen this card in my Goblin list. So if we're making ridiculous amounts of tokens, chances are we're going to attack with them first. That way they're tapped. So at the beginning of our end step, your opponents are just going to lose all that life anyway. This is a very powerful card. Okay, going back to the Mutavault thing. Here's the artifact I was talking about. With Book of Exalted Deeds. Seeing how Mutavault is every single creature type, all we have to do is pay 3 mana, activate this, exile the Book of Exalted Deeds, and put that Enlighten counter on Mutavault. Basically, you can't lose the game, your opponents can't win the game. And that sounds like a pretty good place to be. Okay. There is a slight soldier tribe theme here, but that's probably not on purpose. So, first up is Odric, Master Tactician. Basically, what he's going to allow us to do is we get to control our opponent's combat and how they block. Now we have a couple Lord effects that is going to give us even more tokens with Captain of the Watch, Field Marshal. All these creatures are going to make our tokens even bigger. So we have Field Marshal, which will give other soldiers +1/+1 and first strike. Here's a strange one with Archetype of Courage. I can't think of too many situations where first strike has been bad. I think first strike is severely underutilized in combat. I mean, of course, we all love double strike, but there's nothing wrong with first strike. Now we have Prava of the Steel Legion. He's a cat. He's a cat soldier. He's a cat soldier that makes more soldiers if you have 4 mana. But on your turn, all your tokens are going to become 2 5s. That's crazy. Now, we're going to draw even more cards with Mentor of the Meek. Because Darien's going to make a crap ton of 1/1s. We're going to pay 1 and draw more cards. I'm starting to see a theme here. Hopefully you do too. Now we have Revenant Hoplite. This guy is just going to create more tokens equal to your devotion to white. Now we have a very fun one with Catapult Master. This guy, if you have a ridiculous amount of tokens, which we probably will, are just going to exile your opponent's creatures just by tapping them. And when you tap those creatures at your end step, if you have that Throne of the God Pharaoh, they're going to lose life. Man, the synergies in this are very, very nice. So, if you guys are enjoying this, which I am very much, let me know in the comments below. So, here's our life gain. First up is the iconic Soul Warden. We're going to gain 1 life whenever another creature enters the battlefield. Within that, Soul's Attendant. Another one, but this is just for your creatures, is Impassioned Orator. Within that, Anointer Priest. And we're going to gain 1 life when these tokens die as well with Daxos, Blessed by the Sun. This is a very powerful card. Because when creatures enter or die, you're going to gain 1 life. Now we have Linden, the Steadfast Queen, to gain us even more life. But what makes her a little different, she's going to count for every single white creature that attacks. So you could possibly gain upwards of 50 or more life, depending on how many tokens you created. Now we have Sutra Priest. Sutra Priest has infinite combo possibilities as well, but it's just another way that we can gain and drain our opponents. Okay, here's the non-soldiers, but they're all going to play a role in this deck. First up is Verge Rangers. He kind of has a land tax-ish appeal to him. If your opponents have more land than you, you can play lands from the top of your library. But also, he'll give you the ability of looking at your top card at any time. And, of course, we have Sad Robot to go get more land and draw a card. He's so sad. Why are you sad? Now we have Welcoming Vampire. I really like Welcoming Vampire. It's a well-costed 2/3 flyer that's going to draw a card every single time, any time a creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield. It does kind of suck that it only triggers once each turn, but I can see why they did that. That way, you know, reasons. Okay, now we have Rumor Gatherer. This is going to synergize with all the other creatures entering the battlefield. If it's the first time, you get to scry. If it's the second time, you get to draw a card. That's pretty good. Now we have Ogier Talk, Deepest Foundation. This card is nuts. She's kind of like a Parallel Lives or a Anointed Procession that can transform into a land. Basically, what that means is when we make 1 token, we get 3 times that amount, which means additional triggers, additional creatures, yada yada. But the backside is kind of cool. Let's check this out. The backside is called Temple of Civilization. It's just a land, but you can pay 3 and flip this back over if you attack with 3 or more creatures. And chances are we're going to have 3 or more creatures. Okay, now we have Knight Captain of Eos. He's going to give us 2 more soldier tokens, but he's going to be our fog effect. by paying 1 white, sacrificing a soldier, which would trigger something else whenever a creature you control dies. It does something by preventing combat damage. Now we have Benelish Marshal. These are just going to be more anthem effects for all our creatures. Now we have Krovax. He's a lord as well, but he's going to affect our opponent's creatures by giving them -1/-1. That's good, but we can do better. And he protects himself by paying 2 life. So if he gets targeted, just pay 2 life, bring him back to your hand. Okay, now we have Daru War Chief. This is going to make our soldier spells cost less, so there's more cost reduction, but he's going to make your soldiers bigger. Ah, there she is. Now we have Elesh Norn, Grand Cenobite. I don't think this card needs too much introduction. It's very cut and dry. Your creatures get bigger, your opponent's creatures get way smaller. But if you pair Elesh Norn with Krovax, you have now entered what is considered a black ability. Because technically, black is responsible for doing the minus abilities. But it's Elesh Norn. So, okay. Now we're going to capitalize on all that life gain with Archangel of Thune. We're going to gain life. We're going to make our creatures bigger. The same thing with Heliod Sunground. But if it doesn't have lifelink, give it lifelink. Okay. What more needs to be said? Kjeldor Guardian. If we have 40 or more life, we win the game. And we're going to be gaining a crap ton of life. Alright, that was the creatures. Let me know what y'all thought of that. I think that was pretty spicy. Okay. There is one Planeswalker in this entire deck, and it's Elspeth Sun's Champion. She makes tokens. She destroys all creatures with power 4 or greater. So hopefully by that time, we've controlled our opponents enough to where we can make our creatures bigger and just take them out. And if you ever get to 7 loyalty, the game is probably over anyway. Okay. Here are the enchantments. Of course, we're playing white. We're playing land tax. That way we can go get every single land out of our deck. Most of these enchantments are going to interact with creatures gaining life. So there's a Johnny's Welcome, which is a Soul Warden. Anointed Procession to give us even more tokens. Divine Visitation. If you guys remember my Sithis video, we run this as well. Basically, we're doing the same thing where we're turning 1/1 tokens into angels. Honor the Peer as a Lord effect to make them even bigger. Intangible Virtue. This only counts for tokens, but that's primarily what we're doing. We're going to make them bigger, but this gives them vigilance. That way they don't tap. I do see a kind of slight confliction with them having vigilance and Throne of the God Pharaoh because they want to be tapped, but I don't know. Now we have a very powerful enchantment with any go wide token creature deck. with Carther's Crusade. This is going to snowball to the point where every single creature is going to be so huge, you're just going to basically overrun your opponents probably that turn. Okay, now we have a standard favorite of mine. I played this card a while back, and I absolutely love this card. With Dawn of Hope. This will trigger every single time you gain life. All you do, you pay 2 mana, you get to draw a card. But within that, you can pay 4 as many times as you want, and you get a 1/1 soldier with lifelink. I'm not sure how this interacts with Divine Visitation, because Divine Visitation is a replacement effect. So I don't know if it would still retain the lifelink. I don't think it would, but if you guys could give me a ruling on that, on how the Dawn of Hope White Soldier token with lifelink enters if Divine Visitation is out, let me know. I'm genuinely curious. Okay, now let's get into the instants. There's not too many instants and sorceries, but mainly these are just here to like kind of protect our stuff or protect Darien. So first up is Brave the Elements. But in a weird way, with Brave the Elements, you can use this offensively by just naming the color that your opponent's creatures are, and then they can't block, so you just run them over. Okay, now we have Rootborn Defenses. This is going to populate and give us indestructibility. This is really fun if someone plays a sweeper. You're just like, all right, Rootborn Defenses. My stuff lives, your stuff dies. A similar one is Unbreakable Formation. But what makes Unbreakable Formation a little bit better is if you cast this during your main phase, you get to put a +1 counter on all your creatures. And they gain Vigilance until the end of turn. Or, in a pinch, it'll save your board. Okay, now we have a very powerful one with Akroma's Will. Chances are we're going to have our commander, so we're going to choose both of these effects where our creatures gain flying, vigilance, double strike until the end of turn, or lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors. So basically, go out there, kids, gain a lot of life, make a lot of dudes, run your opponents over. That's the moral of this story. Now we got some spot removal with Swords of the Plowshare, Path to Exile. These are pretty common. Then we have Return to Dust. That way we can deal with artifacts and enchantments. But more importantly, we get to exile it. Okay. Our first sorcery is Secret Rendezvous. Basically, your friend's going to draw 3 cards. You're going to draw 3 cards for 3 mana. Now we have some sweepers of our own with Masked Calcify. This is going to be very beneficial because it destroys all non-white creatures. Citywide Bust. That way we can destroy all the bigger creatures, but not ours. And Austere Command. That's a pretty classic one. Basically, you get the option of destroying all artifacts, enchantments, Just destroying all creatures with mana cost 3 or less, or 4 or greater. Okay. That was the deck tech for good old Darien, King of Kjeldor. This was a really fun deck tech. I really appreciate everyone being here. If y'all can, please like this video, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.